Hello, everybody. So it's been almost 8 whole years since Breaking Bad has ended. That's nuts. It felt like it was just yesterday I was watching the finale of the show, and now it's been 8 years. But it's interesting because in that time, a lot of great TV shows have come and gone, and we've seen the explosion of streaming sites like Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, HBO Live, and these have allowed TV shows to become more experimental and have more targeted and niche audiences. But despite all of that, no TV show before or since has been able to come close to what Breaking Bad accomplished in just the 5 short seasons that it was on the air. And here's why. First and most importantly, there's the visual storytelling and the cinematography. One of the pitfalls that television shows fall into much too easily is that they rely way too heavily on just dialogue alone to show characters their development, what they're thinking, how they're feeling, and what it is that the writers are trying to convey to the audience. And that's problematic because think about it. More than 70% of all communication in the real life. When the show first began, Hank looked like he was going to fill this kind of cliched role of a generic like jock type. It's not necessarily a bad guy, but he's also kind of a douche and a musclehead. Anyone who has watched the entire show from start to finish knows that's not who Hank was. After Hank kills a drug dealer in self-defense on the line of duty, we begin to really see who his character is and see how he changes. He has trouble breathing and begins arguing with his wife, and even at one point illegally beats up Jesse. Later, when it appears like he might be getting fired, he actually seems relieved, because deep down he knows the toll that his job has taken on him and his family. And when Hank is shot and he almost dies, we see the very real journey of his recovery and how it takes a toll on his marriage. Now he struggles to be a good husband, uncle, and friend. In that way, Hank is one of the most human characters on the show. But what makes it interesting is how the show chooses to use clever imagery in the cinematography to convey his character's development and struggles instead of using dialogue alone, making his journey feel even more real to the audience, making it feel like they could understand him even better. It is never straight up said that he's dealing with or struggling with some form of PTSD after all the traumatic events he's experienced, like getting shot, shooting a drug dealer, seeing a decapitated head on a turtle. But instead, it chooses to show us this with clever scenes like when he has a panic attack in the elevator, or when he breaks down crying in the elevator with Marie. A lot of weird things happen in elevators in the show. But and when he even throws Tuco's grill into the river. No further explanation is needed to understand what this character is going through. No dialogue is needed. We can just see and we can understand from watching these powerful scenes what he is going through. A lesser show would have completely botched his character and his development. Similar things can be said for pretty much all of the major characters on the show. Walt's character development is shown in pivotal scenes like when he chooses not to save Jane when she's overdosing. You see that when he first notices she's overdosing, Walt leans in and he's about to do something because he sees this girl dying there. But then he slowly stops and he looks at Jesse. He knows that if he saves Jane, Jesse will likely never get clean, and he painfully fights the urge to save her. You can see in his eyes, you can see the conflict in Walt's eyes. This is one of the most pivotal scenes in the show because it demonstrates the shift from how Walt goes from just this normal school teacher to a man who can do some horrible things. And, it does this scene without even a single line of dialogue. The pink teddy bear is another great use of imagery to convey a message. The pink teddy bear is something that at first glance makes no sense. But then they show it again and again, alongside with the events of the season, and you begin to notice that it has a deeper meaning. The bear, like Walt and his family, is something that was once intact, normal, and even beautiful. But because of Walt's actions, both his family and the teddy bear are now destroyed and will never be the same or as beautiful as they once were. This bear represents the consequences for Walt's sins that he can no longer run from. And if you've watched the show, you know Walter has a lot of sins to answer for. It literally fell from the sky onto his property at the same time that his family was leaving because his wife had discovered what he had done. Similarly, we see Jesse very carefully handling a bug in the opening of the episode where he goes to the house of the meth addicts who stole his drugs with a gun, and he attempts to violently get his drugs or his money back. This scene is significant because it represents the fact that he's fundamentally not a bad human being, Jesse. He's he's just in over his head and he's trying to make a little bit of money off of this whole meth operation. When handling the insect, he does it very delicately, much like how he took care of the meth addict's child when he saw the conditions that the parents had him living in. These are just some examples, but throughout the series, there are countless other scenes in pretty much nearly every episode in which the beautiful and artistic visual storytelling is used to get points across. Other examples of this include Skylar's scene at the Four Corners Monument, how that represents how much she wants to leave Walt, but she feels trapped. Another example is the fly representing Walt's guilt and his feeling of his sense of loss of control over the direction that his life is going in, and the clothes that the lead characters are dressed in, they gradually get darker as the show goes on, representing their mental states. All these scenes put together makes Breaking Bad one of the most visually striking shows of all time, and I've yet to see another show come close to it in this regards. Next, there is the show's legendary humor and wit. The premise of this show is over the top and kind of ridiculous, and what makes it great is it's not afraid to make fun of itself from time to time. While I would not describe the show by any means to be a comedy, there are genuinely funny moments in just about every single episode. This prevents the show from becoming too dark and gritty. Part of the reason why Breaking Bad was also able to perfectly straddle the line between serious storytelling and these comedic moments was because the amazing chemistry that the cast had with each other. Walter actually seems like a teacher who is constantly being annoyed by his stupid student Jesse. So when the two of them bickered or get into ridiculous situations, like when the RV broke down in the middle of nowhere because Jesse left the keys in the ignition, the funny back and forth that takes place between them, it actually feels genuine. And finally, the last reason why the show was so great was simply because it was short. It knew when to end and, equally as important, how to end. Think about it for a minute. Most of Breaking Bad's seasons only lasted for about 13 episodes. And there were only 5 seasons in the entire show. That's very short for a series that was as successful as Breaking Bad. Usually studios try to drag these things out when they're successful. And oftentimes seasons, the first 2 episodes are great. Then the middle kind of gets boring and it doesn't pick back up until the second to last episode of the season. But the shorter seasons of Breaking Bad make each episode feel important, like there's no unnecessary filler just shoved in there to keep the story going. But even episodes like The Fly, that a lot of viewers thought were boring, had very specific purpose. It showed the character development of Jesse and Walt. The fact that AMC allowed the show to end on the way that the creative team wanted, and when the creative team wanted, allowed them to craft a perfect ending that did not feel dragged out. Honestly, I could go on for days about how every aspect of this show was great. Everything from the cinematography to the music and sound editing, the writing and the acting was perfect. This show is the definition of a television masterpiece, and I don't anticipate any show in the near future is going to be able to come close to what this show accomplished in the 5 short seasons that it was on the air. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, please leave a like, subscribe, and be sure to comment down below. And let me know what shows or TV shows you'd like me to talk about next. See you next time.